As we start this presentation, this is part one of a part two series on upstanding morals and principles. And this first presentation of the woman and the whore it's more the physical aspect of morals and uprightness. And the second one will be more on the principles, the spiritual morals. But as we begin this study, there's one principle I really want to base this on, and that is the first commandment, thou shalt have no other gods before us. And I want to work with the seventh commandment in particular, thou shalt not commit adultery. This is not lessening the other commandments, I'm just highlighting these two. Solomon was one of the wisest men that ever lived. In his early reign as king of all Israel, he performed his affairs with much wisdom. And one notable occasion you might recall was his wisdom demonstrated in the two women with their sons, the one dead and the other living. In 1 Kings chapter 3, verses 16 to 20, we have these two women, actually they're harlots, children 3 days apart, and one smothers hers and then claims the other one. And in 1 Kings chapter 3, verse 28, and all Israel heard of the judgment which the king had judged, and they feared the king, for they saw that the wisdom of God was with him. So Solomon made a wise decision. He said, kill the child, cut it in half, and give half to each. And the real mother soon came out and said, no, leave the child. So Solomon had wisdom from God. The answer was profound. But sadly, Solomon didn't always exercise the example of godly wisdom. He had a problem, and that was with woman. By the time we come over to 1 Kings chapter 11, verses 1 and 2, we have these words, but King Solomon loved many strange women, together with the daughter of Pharaoh, woman of the Moabites, the Ammonites, the Edomites, the Zidonians, and the Hittites, of the nations concerning which the Lord said unto the children of Israel, ye shall not go into them, neither shall they come in unto you. No mention of woman from Israel. Strong counsel here from God to Israel. These nations were enemies of God and should have been enemies of God's people. Why? Well, verse 2 continues, and it says, for surely they will turn away your heart after their gods. That's why. Israel was not to go into them. They were not to come into Israel. These nations were not permitted to have any intimacy with Israel at all, because that intimacy would get hold of their hearts and draw them away. Beholding a beautiful woman, nice on the outside, but not so on the inside, you become changed into their likeness. So what did Solomon do? Well, 1 Kings chapter 11, verses 2 and 3, it says, Solomon clave unto these in love, and he had 700 wives, princesses, and 300 concubines. Oh, really, you think? He blundered on into his intimate relationship with women of all these Babylonian nations that God had forbidden, with the worst consequences coming. Verses 3 to 5. And his wives turned away his heart, for it came to pass when Solomon was old that his wives turned away his heart after other gods, and his heart was not perfect with the Lord his God, as was the heart of David his father. For Solomon went after Ashtaroth, the goddess of the Zidonians, and after Milcom, the abomination of the Ammonites. Now that Milcom was a horrible god. It was the god Molech, and they sacrificed their children in this hot, burning beast. So the intermarriage of these women led Solomon onto a path of destruction. In verse 8 it says, and likewise did he for all his strange wives, which burnt incense and sacrifice unto their gods. How did this sit with God? Well, verses 9 and 10 tell us how it sat with God. And the Lord was angry with Solomon, because his heart was turned from the Lord God of Israel, which had appeared unto him twice, and had commanded him concerning this thing, that he should not go after other gods. Did Solomon have ample evidence of God in his life? But what did he do? Verse 10 brings this out, but he kept not that which the Lord commanded. And in verse 6 we have the words, and Solomon did evil in the sight of the Lord, and went not fully after the Lord, as did David his father. And we say, oh, Solomon, Solomon. What a glorious start, but what a tragic baggage along the way. Did Solomon make it into Hebrews 11? No, David did, but Solomon didn't. But was this the end for Solomon? No, there's more to the story. It's always a thrill to have a good ending to a sad story. We can be grateful for that, at least in this case, for Solomon's sake. You see, we have the book of Ecclesiastes, and in chapter 2 of Ecclesiastes, from verses 7 to 11, we have these words. I got me servants and maidens, and had servants born in my house. Also I had great possessions of great and small cattle above all that were in Jerusalem before me. I gathered me also silver and gold, and the peculiar treasure of kings and of the provinces. I gat me men singers and women singers, and the delights of the sons of men as musical instruments, and that of all sorts. So I was great, and increased more than all that were before me in Jerusalem. Also my wisdom remained with me, and whatsoever mine eyes desired, I kept not from them. I withheld not my heart from any joy, for my heart rejoiced in all that my labour, and this was my portion of all my labour. Verse 11, then I looked on all the works that my hands had wrought, and on the labour that I had laboured to do, and behold, all was vanity and vexation of spirit, and there was no profit under the sun. As Solomon looked back over the path of his life, all he saw was destruction, folly, vanity, and vexation of spirit. This made such an impact on Solomon's life that he saw fit to write Proverbs chapter 7, and that's where we're going to focus quite a bit of our study. Proverbs 7, verses 1 to 4. My son, keep my words and lay up my commandments with thee. Keep my commandments and live, and my law as the apple of thine eye. Bind them upon thy fingers, write them upon the table of thine heart. Say unto wisdom, thou art my sister, and call understanding thy kinswoman. Keep the commandments with you in verse 1. Keep the commandments in all aspects of your life in verse 2. Keep the law a priority of your mind's eye in verse 2. Wrap the law onto your fingers and in your hands in verse 3. Imprint the commandments into your heart in verse 3. Place wisdom and understanding alongside the commandments that are in you, beside you, on your fingers and in your heart in verse 4. And then we have verse 5, and it says this, that they may keep thee from the strange woman, from the stranger which flattereth with her words. Wow. Solomon has experienced being taken into a snare, and now he has plenty of counsel for his son from experience. In fact, for any young man in his course of life. He's going to need all the qualities and the principles of verses 1 to 4 to shield him from the traps and the devices of strange woman, strange to righteousness, strange to godliness. Even strange to the principles of how God made her, this woman seduces and takes a man down. But Solomon goes on to reinforce this lesson. Look at verses 6 and 7. Proverbs 7, 6 and 7. For at the window of my house I looked through my casement, and beheld among the simple ones, I discerned among the youth a young man void of understanding. Here we have a young man, not real bright, he's simple. Oh, he may well be educated and not necessarily dumb and illiterate. In fact, he is regarded as a son in the margin. But he's simple and void of understanding, at least with his morals. And we go on to verses 8 to 12, passing through the street near her corner, and he went the way to her house. In the twilight, in the evening, in the black and dark night, and behold, there met him a woman with an attire of a harlot and subtle of heart. She is loud and stubborn, her feet abide not in her house. Now is she without, now in the streets, and lieth in wait at every corner. Here we see this young man wandering in the streets near the house of this strange woman. He is walking into the twilight, it's darkening. He progresses into the evening, it's getting darker. He progresses into the black and dark night, that's the blackness of night. He is walking and progressing into very dangerous territory. Back in Ecclesiastes chapter 2 and verse 14, Solomon writes this, "The wise man's eyes are in his head, but fools walketh in darkness." This woman is very vocal. She is loud. This woman is very determined. The text says she's stubborn. This woman is out for a very specific purpose, out in the street, in the darkness, lying in wait. And there's a reason for this stubbornness. Verses 10 to 14, Proverbs 7, 10 to 14, "And behold, there met him a woman with the attire of a harlot and subtle of heart. She is loud and stubborn, her feet abide not in her house. Now is she without, now in the streets, and lieth in wait at every corner." Verse 13, "So she caught him and kissed him, and with an impudent face said unto him, I have peace offerings with me this day, have I paid my vows." This type of woman has a purpose. She is out for gain. She's out for her own gain. She is purposefully baiting the innocent for their blood and for their wealth. She is taking them down into the pit. "Oh, there will be all the riches that you can think of. Your house shall be full. Come and work with us. And from the wealth we gain, we can all live with this together." But does one ask, who's holding the purse strings to that account? Then comes the answer to that scheme. We have it here in verses 15 to 19. "Therefore came I forth to meet thee, diligently to seek thy face, and I have found thee. I have decked my bed with coverings of tapestry, with carved works, with fine linen of Egypt. I have perfumed my bed with myrrh and aloes and cinnamon. Come, let us take our fill of love until the morning. Let us solace ourselves with loves. For the good man is not at home. He is gone on a long journey." Somebody else is involved here. Somebody else is holding some purse strings, possibly. But this lad is rather simple and doesn't realize the danger he's walking into. He is walking right into a snare. This woman is taking full advantage of his simpleness. It goes on in verses 13 to 15, "So she caught him and kissed him, and with an impudent face said to him, I have peace offerings with me. This day have I paid my vows. Therefore came I forth to meet thee, diligently to seek thy face, and I have found thee." Oh, she has a purpose, all right. She is affectionate and warm. She caught and kissed him in verse 13. She is obviously available because she's paid her vows in verse 14, and she's charming and very charismatic. Verses 16 and 17, "I have decked my bed with coverings of tapestry and carved works with fine linen of Egypt. I have perfumed my bed with myrrh, aloes, and cinnamon." She is certainly well prepared. She has bought her merchandise from the traders of the world, and that's in Revelation 18. That's the spiritual side. She's bought her merchandise from the world. The scent is alluring. Now she presses her charm, her temptation, even further. Verse 18, "Come, let us take our fill of love until the morning. Let us solace ourselves with loves." Is this a temptation? It certainly is to the young unwise man. She has a purpose and determined to get her way, but to the young man it certainly is a dangerous situation to be in. Today, many are so freely taking part of the same path of destruction. The principle of morality and modesty are cast off on the beds of lust. Perhaps in our days of youth, we would meet someone of the opposite gender with respect, and perhaps the closest would be a handshake. What the respectful handshake was then, it is everything exposed now. The devil has lowered the standards to bypass all discretion and prudence, and the results are baleful, disease, troubled and broken marriages, and it damages the following generation. Far too many carry on this practice even without a pang of conscience. The sexual revolution of the 60s and the 70s has wreaked havoc in today's society and has only resulted in hurt and violence and the breakdown of the family unit. Tragically, it has tragic results. Verses 19 and 20, "For the good man is not at home, he has gone on a long journey, he has taken a bag of money with him and will come home at the day appointed." There's another element here. This woman is answerable to somebody else. She is not on her own. She obviously has a conscience that someone else has ownership. She calls him a good man, but one has to wonder what he is absent for. He has a bag of money, gone away on his own, and it indicates that he'll come home when the money is gone, on the day appointed. But if the good man was there, maybe she would not be acting different. She might not have been out on the streets, possibly. So because he is away, she says in verse 18, "Come." Verse 21, "With her much fair speech she caused him to yield, and with the flattering of her lips she forced him." Did she seduce him into her purpose? Yes, the text says that she did. But did he have a choice in all this? Yes, he did. He acted out his choice. Verse 22 and 23, we have these words, "He goeth after her straightway, as an ox goeth to the slaughter, or as a fool to the correction of the stocks, till a dart strike through his liver, as a bird hasteth to the snare, and knoweth not that it is for his life." To every choice, there are inevitable consequences. Verses 24 to 27, "Hearken unto me now, therefore, O ye children, and attend to the words of my mouth. Let not thine heart decline to her ways, go not astray in her paths. For she has cast down many wounded, yea, many strong men have been slain by her. Her house is the way to hell, going down the chambers of death." In verse 1, Solomon is pleading with his son, and in verse 24, he is pleading with all his children. So this sexual revolution is not only limited to the 1960s and the 1970s, it's been around for a very long time. So Solomon has experienced the results of free love and has also experienced the consequences and warns the next generation against it. He pleads to all who follow him, "Listen to my words. I'm telling you from my own experience. I've been there. It's not worth it. It just brings sorrow, anguish, and guilt. It leaves a trail of destruction and bitter remorse." And note well, it didn't just all start with Solomon. David, his father, was no example of purity and prudence himself. With his multiple wives, it only brought exactly that, sorrow, remorse, and guilt. And it left a trail of destruction and bitterness, and that was sadly passed on to the next generation. They weren't free of it. They weren't free of these troubles. Woman can be very powerful in regards to morals. She can take a man down very fast by lowering her barriers or she can encourage purity by keeping up her barriers. But Solomon's plea is, don't give in to this woman's charming words. Don't get caught in the trap of adultery and fornication. It will only lead you to the slaughter, verse 22, the stocks, verse 22, the snare in verse 23, led astray in verse 25, to hell in verse 27, and to death also in verse 27. That is a list that all young men should want to avoid. And foresight and foreknowledge are the best ingredients, and that is why we need to study it and talk about it. If we don't talk about it as parents to our children or our grandchildren, or if we don't talk about it in our church, we are finishing up with the simple young people with no direction. If we do talk about it and caution our young ones, and it is all here for the reading, we have young people who can at least make informed decisions and choices from intelligent knowledge. If we have told them and cautioned them, the results are on them. If we have not advised them and cautioned them, the results are on us. And Ezekiel chapter 33, verses 5 to 9 talk about that. If we've given warning, we've given warning. If we haven't, it's on us. The problem of this young man is that he missed something. And we move on now to chapter 8 of Proverbs, verses 1 to 5. He missed something. Notice this. Doth not wisdom cry, and understanding put forth her voice? She standeth in the top of the high places, by the way in the places of the paths. She crieth at the gates, at the entry of the city, at the coming in, at the doors. Unto you, O men, I call, and my voice is to the sons of man. O ye simple, understand wisdom, and ye fools, be ye of an understanding heart. When this young man came into the town, he missed the counsel of wisdom. Where was wisdom standing? In the top of the high places, on the paths, at the gates, the entry to the city, at the doors, calling to the young men, to sons. Oh, come on, you mean there are all these beacons of warning and he missed or ignored all of them? How he missed all this wisdom, we're not told, but it could well have been the home life was dysfunctional and the counsel had not been given to the children. Remember who is writing this. Solomon's home was very much dysfunctional, and his father David was no example of moral uprightness either. We do know that Solomon was writing this and that he is giving some really wise counsel now. He's most probably acknowledging that it was he who was simple and missed wisdom and understanding at the town gates. But here, in Proverbs 8, Solomon is clearly tell all who read this record there is absolutely no reason for him to miss this wisdom. It was set out in 5 places for him to see. But whatever happened, he was loitering aimlessly around her street corner, simple, lacking understanding. And it is pretty obvious she missed wisdom or didn't want it either, even though she was living in the town where wisdom was well available. And notice too that Solomon identifies this wisdom as a female in chapter 8 and verse 2. Here is a pure woman calling out to the young men to watch out as they come into the city. But regardless of all this wisdom that was available, this young man missed it. Here was this young man's destination. And we look here in Proverbs chapter 6 and verse 32, we have these words, but whosoever committeth adultery with a woman lacketh understanding. He that doeth it destroys his own soul. Not only death, but he actually destroys his own soul. This is the second death. This has eternal consequences. Now we're going to do a shift. We're going to look at another woman. With many similarities, this woman also meets a young man. This woman is also subtle of heart. This woman is also loud and determined. This woman also catches a young man. This woman also wants this young man to lie with her. This woman's good man of the house is also on a way on a long journey. Yes, this woman is beautiful to look upon, has much fair speech, has flattering lips, becomes a fierce temptation to a young man. We're going to Genesis chapter 39 and verse 1. And Joseph was brought down to Egypt. What does Egypt represent? Egypt represents darkness. In Exodus chapter 14, verses 19 and 20, you can see that Egypt's in darkness. It brings shame, Isaiah 30, verse 3. It brings confusion, Isaiah 30, verse 3. And it brings weakness, Isaiah 30, verse 7. The setting is similar to Proverbs chapter 7, verse 9 in darkness. But as we read further, a difference begins to show up. Genesis chapter 39 and verses 2 to 6. And the Lord was with Joseph, and he was a prosperous man, and he was in the house of his master, the Egyptian. And his master saw that the Lord was with him, and that the Lord made all that he did to prosper in his hand. And Joseph found grace in his sight, and he served him, and he made him overseer over his house and all that he had put into his hand. Verse 5, and it came to pass from the time that he had made him overseer in his house and over all that he had, that the Lord blessed the Egyptian's house for Joseph's sake, and the blessing of the Lord was upon all that he had in his house and in the field. And he left all that he had in Joseph's hand, and he knew not aught what he had, save the bread which he did eat. And Joseph was a goodly person and well favored. The Lord was with Joseph. The Lord prospered his hand. He found grace in his master, and he gained his master's absolute trust. The Lord even blessed Potiphar's house because of Joseph. Joseph was a goodly person, and he was well favored. No mention of this young man being void of understanding. Look at Genesis 39 and verse 7. And it came to pass after these things that his master's wife cast her eyes upon Joseph, and she said, Lie with me. The good man was obviously absent. Genesis 39 verses 8 and 9, we have these words, But he refused, and said unto his master's wife, Behold, my master wotteth not what is with me in the house, and he has committed all that he has to my hand. There is none greater in his house than I, neither has he kept back anything from me but thee. Because thou art his wife, how then can I do this great wickedness and sin against God? But he refused. After all that my master, your husband, has committed to my trust, how then can I do this great wickedness and sin against, was it Potiphar? No. How can I do this great sin against God? Genesis 39, and we go on, and we come here to verse 10, and it came to pass, as she spoke to Joseph day by day, that he hearkened not unto her to lie by her or to be with her. But the same as the Proverbs 7 woman, this woman is stubborn. She's persistent, but still Joseph did not submit to this powerful temptation. Verse 11, and it came to pass about this time that Joseph went into the house to do his business, and there was none of the men of the house there within. Dangerous situation. Joseph is around her doors. He does not go around the house simple and void of understanding, though. He goes into the house to attend to business. Verse 12, and she caught him by his garment, saying, Lie with me. And he left his garment in her hand and fled and got him out. She, like the woman in Proverbs 7 and verse 13, catches him. She, like the woman in Proverbs 7:14, has prepared her bed of defilement. But this is where the two stories widely differ. Proverbs 7:21, the young man yields. Genesis chapter 39, verse 12, Joseph flees and gets out. We carry on in Genesis 39, verses 13 to 15. And it came to pass, when she saw that he had left his garment in her hand and was fled forth, that she called unto the men of her house and spoke unto them, saying, See, he has brought in a Hebrew unto us to mock us. He came in unto me to lie with me, and I cried with a loud voice. And it came to pass, when he heard that I had lifted up my voice and cried, that he left his garment with me and fled and got him out. A good thing Joseph didn't get involved with this woman. Now we see who she really is. But she, like the woman in Proverbs 7:11, became very loud and pretty stubborn with her story. What are the results? With the story of Proverbs 7, we don't hear what happened to the good man or when he came home. There's no record of that. But the Proverbs 7 young man's fate is sealed. As an ox to the slaughter, as a fool to the stocks, as the dart shooting into his liver, as the bird into the snare, as going to hell, as the chambers of death. Actually, he destroys his own soul. Do you think there's enough description of the rewards of adultery here? But the story in Genesis 39 does continue to when the good man Potiphar came home. Genesis 39, and we continue the story here. And she laid up his garment by her until his Lord came home. And she spake unto him according to these words, saying, The Hebrew servant which thou hast brought unto us came in unto me to mock me. And it came to pass, as I lifted up my voice and cried, that he left his garment with me, and he fled out. In verse 19 it says, And it came to pass, when his master heard the words of his wife, which she spake unto him, saying, After this manner did thy servant to me, that his wrath was kindled. And Joseph's master took him and put him into the prison, a place where the king's prisoners were bound, and he was there in the prison. A sad ending for one who stood up for godly principles, one would have to say. But there's more to the story. Patriarchs and Prophets, page 218, brings this out. Had Potiphar believed his wife's charge against Joseph, the young Hebrew would have lost his life. But the modesty and the uprightness that had uniformly characterized his conduct were proof of his innocence, and yet to save the reputation of his master's house, he was abandoned to disgrace and to bondage. But the Lord was with Joseph and showed him mercy and gave him favor in the sight of the keeper of the prison. Even here he was blessed. And the keeper of the prison committed to Joseph's hand all the prisoners that were in the prison, and whatsoever they did there, he was the doer of it. The keeper of the prison looked not to anything that was under his hand, because the Lord was with him, and that which he did, the Lord made to prosper. Even though we see through a glass darkly, God will reward all his loyal servants with triumph openly. In Proverbs 7, we don't hear any more about the young simple man void of understanding. No, nothing. It's over, gone. He receives his reward, eternal death. That's the wages of sin and death. But we do hear more about Joseph. Yes, he became prime minister of Egypt, a great reward for any man. It paved the way for an amazing delivery for Israel and his family. But Joseph's integrity for standing against such a powerful temptation is rewarded with even greater rewards. As we go to the last book of the Bible, God identifies who is going to make up a very special people, the 144,000. In Revelation chapter 7, verses 4 to 8, And I heard the number of them which were sealed, and there were sealed 144,000 of all the tribes of the children of Israel. And in verse 6, we find here that Manasseh is part of that. But here in verse 8, we don't find Ephraim's name. We have in verse 8, of the tribe of Zebulun were sealed 12,000, and of the tribe of Joseph were sealed 12,000, and of the tribe of Benjamin were sealed 12,000. There are 12 tribes listed, But in regards to Joseph's family, we read that Manasseh is present in verse 6, but Ephraim is not. It is not only the children of Joseph whose names are honored, it is Joseph himself who receives the honor. They have their father's name written in their forehead. They sing the new song. They are not defiled with woman. They are without guile. They follow the Lamb whithersoever he goeth. Youth instructor, we have these words here, beautiful words. When trial came, when the arts of woman were exercised to draw him into iniquity, Joseph preserved his integrity. Fair words and guileful entreaties did not cause him to swerve one hair from the right. All fell on ears that heard not. The law of the Lord garrisoned his soul. He said to the bold enchantress, "How can I do this great wickedness and sin against God?" The woman signally failed to leave Joseph into sin. Satan was defeated. And what was it that protected Joseph? It was a garrison about his soul, and a garrison is a permanent body of troops. In Job chapter 1 and verse 10, it's called a hedge. And we read this here in Reflecting Christ. In his obedience to God's law, man is surrounded as with a hedge and kept from evil. Extremely interesting. You see, we read here that it was Satan who was defeated. And in Job chapter 1, verses 8 to 10, it brings that out. The real battle is not so much about lust or the physical taking of a woman outside of true marriage and fornication and adultery, wrong and all as that is. While both of these accounts involve physical man and a physical woman, the real battle was not about a simple young man and a loud woman. The real battle was not about Potiphar's wife and Joseph. The real underlying battle in all of this is about Christ and Satan. Satan used a woman to take a man down in Proverbs 7 and succeeded. Satan used a woman to take a young man down in Genesis 39, but he failed. And still today, we are to watch with all diligence as we walk in the streets of our cities of a deadly woman. That is a very strong reason why we should get out of the cities and retire into the country. The spirit of prophecy warns against city living as the children who get a street education. Look at these words here in Adventist Home. It says this, many parents remove from the country homes to the city, regarding it as a more desirable or profitable location, but by making this change, they expose their children to many and great temptations. The boys have no employment and they obtain a street education and go on from one step in depravity to another until they lose all interest in anything that is good and pure and holy. How much better had the parents remained with their families in the country where the influences are most favorable for physical and mental strength. Let the youth be taught to labor in tilling the soil and let them sleep the sweet sleep of weariness and innocence. Revelation 14, chapter 8, that's the second angel, has these words to say, and there followed another angel saying, Babylon is fallen, that great city, because she hath made all nations drink of the wine of the wrath of her fornication. With the woman and the man of Proverbs chapter 7, she destroyed the man. And today, if a woman takes a man down, it still destroys the man. And might I say, it's equally other way around. If a man takes a woman down, it destroys the woman. In fact, it actually destroys them both. Yes, the battle today is still between Christ and Satan, but he uses any avenue he can to destroy God's children, and he uses avenues that he knows work. And it is a battle for the mind as well as it is for the body. And Satan gains success to his subjects. It's not only furthers their destruction, it's a gross sin against God. And yes, it takes both the man and the woman down. The devil has used the weapon of fornication, adultery, unfaithfulness from the first recorded distortion of true marriage in Genesis 4:19. Lamech took 2 wives, Adah and Zillah, right up to this very day. It's still happening. He knows it works to his own end. This wickedness is not constrained to the wickedness of the world at large. This wickedness has walked right into the church and it still is taking men and women down, leaving distraught little ones and broken homes. Oh, friends, be alert and on your guard. It is frightening, the choices and decisions that even conservative people are making right up to our day now. Friends, we have had for many years what we've had, we're just throwing our lives to the lions. Be careful. None of us are immune from the devil's attacks, and they will come. We need, friends, more Josephs. Josephs who will frustrate the plans of the devil and gain victory for Jesus. So to close off, let's look at another type of woman. The biblical counsel for a young man today has not changed. He is to look for another type of woman than we have discussed. Young men, take heed of these words and live by them. Or if parents, take these words and share them both with your sons and your daughters or even your grandchildren. Look for a Proverbs 31 girl. In verses 10 to 12, we have these words, "Who can find a virtuous woman? For her price is far above rubies. The heart of her husband doth safely trust in her, so that he shall have no need of spoil. She will do him good and not evil all the days of her life." This is a woman who will not take a man down. This woman will build him up. She is a worker for the home and for her family. This is a woman who can be trusted safely. This is a woman who will do her husband and her family good. Proverbs 31 and verse 30, we have these words, "Favor is deceitful, and beauty is vain, but a woman that feareth the Lord, she shall be praised." It is not her favor and popularity that should attract. That's deceitful. It is not her visible beauty that should attract. That's vanity. It is her attributes in Christ that should attract. That's worthy of praise. Verse 26, we have these words, "She opens her mouth with wisdom, and in her tongue is the law of kindness." Men, the counsel for us is to stop at the gates to gain wisdom. Because this honorable woman stopped at the gates and she gained wisdom. You know, there's a modern proverb, and I think we could well look at it today as well. When a young man looks for his virtuous woman, she should be so immersed in Jesus Christ that he will have to find Christ first before he finds her. We should be striving that every woman in the church today becomes a Proverbs 31, 10 to 29 woman. And we should be striving for every man in the church to become a Proverbs 8, 1 to 4 man, gaining wisdom. Then we wouldn't have the broken homes at the same rate as the world. Then we would be able to point to the Bible and say, this is our church. The devil would fail in his attempts to rip families apart and tear the church apart. Does this subject deserve our attention here today? Why spend time on this subject right here now? Well, there's a reason, and it's loud and clear. And our closing quote is Patriarchs and Prophets, page 457, "As we approach the close of time, as the people of God stand upon the borders of the heavenly Canaan, Satan will, as of old, redouble his efforts to prevent them from entering the goodly land. He lays snares for every soul. By worldly friendships, by the charms of beauty, by pleasure-seeking, mirth, feasting, or the wine cup, he tempts to the violation of the 7th commandment." We here have primarily focused on the physical aspects of adultery, But there's another aspect of adultery that needs a study all of its own. We will share in the second part of this spiritual adultery. God bless you. Be of good courage. Hold your morals and your principles high. The Bible has good counsel. Heavenly Father, I pray that we would look heavenward, please, away from this world, and please may we behold the beauty and the purity of the morals of heaven. Thank you for the Bible, that it gives us counsel as to how to live good, clean, moral lives. And Father, may we take the counsel and apply it. May we stop at the gates of the cities before we enter and gain wisdom, please. May we be faithful stewards. May we be ones that we can be counted on, Father. And may we have the outcome of Joseph and not the young man in Proverbs 7. Thank you for these words that we read. I pray for every soul within listening of this message that they can be encouraged by what they hear, for we ask it in Jesus' name. Amen.